To make the succulent seashell wreath, we have a wreath. This is a 12-inch grapevine wreath form, and we just got this at the craft store. And then we have some shells. We have a variety of shells, some scallops and some kind of conch things. They probably have a different name than that, but we call them conchs. We have the scallops in white, and we also have some with a little bit of color. And we have a couple specialty extra shells too, just for fun, add a little interest. This is kind of an auger or spiral kind of shell. We have a couple of those. And then we have some succulents. And we didn't need big succulents for this because this is a small wreath. So we actually went to the dollar store and they had these succulents in these little pots. And we're just gonna pull them out of the pots, as easy as that. Throw this part away, probably recycle them. And then we'll use this part of the succulent. So we have a variety of these succulents for this project. We also have a little bit of moss, and the moss is a green color to match our succulents. We'll show you how we'll put that on. And for tools, we have a craft stick. We have wire cutters, that's for the back of the succulents. And then we're gonna put the whole thing together with a hot glue gun, and we like using a high temperature for this craft. To make the succulent seashell wreath, what we want to do is start with our succulents. And I like to start with the biggest succulent first and spread them around on the wreath. And these are the succulents that we pulled out of our little Dollar Tree pots. And usually I would cut the back of this off with wire cutters to glue it to a wreath form. But because we're using a grapevine wreath form, they actually nestle in here pretty nicely. I'm going to cut the stem a tiny bit shorter so it doesn't stick out of the back of the wreath. But I'm going to leave a little bit of a stem on there. And to put the succulent on securely, I'm going to add the hot glue. So here's our hot glue gun. I like to put some of the hot glue on the back of the succulent, and then because we're going to use the stem also, I'm going to put some of the hot glue on the stem. And I'm going to push that down into the grapevine wreath. And it's going to hold it even better than if we just glued it onto the surface. I'm just going to push it down in there. And I'd like to put another succulent on that has this similar color story. So we're spreading this red color around. So I have an almost identical one from the same little pot at Dollar Tree. And I'm going to cut the back off like I did the other one. Almost forgot. These stems aren't even wired. They're so easy to cut. It's kind of molded plastic. And again, I'm going to put some glue around it, a little bit on the stem, and then I'm going to find a spot to kind of nestle it in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the succulents around kind of in a triangle design and a triangle design to spread them around on the wreath. I've got that one in there, and now I think I want one that's a little greener. This is a nice green one, and this one also has a short stem. It's fine. Let me give that a little bit of glue. I only need to put glue on the areas that are going to make contact with the wreath. Otherwise, the glue is just going to dry on the back of the succulent. I'm going to tuck that one in there like that. So I've got 3 here. I'll put one over here now, I think. And I think I'll use one of these bright green ones with the red tips. I think this is a really pretty one. Cut that little end off like I did before. And then I'm going to put more glue on it. And we chose a very clear glue in case any of it shows. We didn't want it to be the milky kind of hot glue. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You can buy hot glue that's a little bit milkier color. I'm just going to tuck this down in. And we've got our triangle here, so I'm going to make another triangle here, so I'm going to put one here. I'm going to use this one that's a little bit smaller because I have this one closer to this one, so there's not quite as much space. I'm going to tuck that in there. So we've got a triangle here, and now we need one down here to make our next triangle. I think I'm going to do another one of this so that I have this color over here too. Snip the end off like we did before. And then a little glue. I love that you don't have to be very precise with the hot glue. I'm going to put that one in there. Now, I think at this point I don't want to put on any more succulents because I need room for my shells. I can always go back and add some more succulents if I feel like I need them. But right now what I've done is I've given myself a base to work with and areas to put the shells. So I'm going to put shells in these open spaces. And I've got a nice big spot here and a nice big shell here. So I think that one's going to go right like that. A little bit tricky with the shells. You don't have a good solid surface to put the glue on that's going to make full contact with the wreath. So you have to kind of feel it and see where is this flat part of the shell, here and here and here, going to make contact with the wreath. And that's where I'm going to put the glue. So I think we're going to have contact up here and here. And this is also why you want this glue to be clear and not milky, because this part, it might show a little bit. Now I want to do another large shell here. And I have some that are have a lot of color, and I have some that have less color, and I think I want to mix up where they go. So if I put this one here, I have a lot of red. I think instead it would be better to use this lighter color up here and save this red one maybe for this corner back here. But again, I'm going to do the trick where I'm going to feel the back and see where it's going to make contact with the wreath and give it some of the glue and then nestle that shell in there. And I'm kind of angling the shells when I put them on. I don't want them all sitting facing the same way upright. I want them kind of twisted and turned a little bit. There's that one. And now I'm going to do that other big one that we picked out over here and put the glue where it's going to make contact and angle it there a little bit. So now I'm just going to keep gluing until I have at least one scallop between each of these succulents, and then I'll add a couple of the specialty shells. So now I've got my 2 triangles of succulents there, sort of evenly spaced around, and I've got a scallop between each one. This is a great base now. Now I can look at the wreath and look for spaces that could take one of the specialty shells. Like there's a little bit of room here, and this seems like it would be a good place to put one of our spirals. You could do the whole thing with all scallops if you wanted to. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you did, I would just suggest maybe mixing up the sizes of the scallops. I have another one of these, and I see I have some more space here. I like the kind of dynamic line of this pointy shell. It kind of adds a little drama where everything else is round. And then we also have these gorgeous conch shells. And I want to make sure we get these on here as I find a spot for one. Here's a really nice big spot for that beautiful shell. And we have some littler ones. And again, I'm just putting the glue where I think it's going to make contact with the wreath. Put that one here. And you can overlap the shell with the shell. The shell's glued onto the shell a little bit. And that's nice. The way these are overlapping, the succulents are overlapping the scallops, it's nice to have the shells overlapping each other a little bit. I have another one of these nice big conch style shells. And I think I'm going to tuck that in with this other one, but kind of lean it at a different angle. We're getting some different colors in here. That's nice. This really mixes up the color story a little bit, which is nice. And then next I want to just look for any spots that could use one more little thing. So we're almost covered, but we want it to be a little over covered. That makes it a really rich, dense wreath. So I think it'd be time to add a couple more succulents. And we don't have room for these big ones now that we've filled everything in. What we're going to do is we're going to cut apart a succulent like this, and we're going to tuck little pieces in. This is a great trick. I've got my wire cutters here, and I'm going to cut off the main piece. There we go. Here. And I can use this small succulent as it is, but I'm going to make it even a little bit smaller. This is a little custom succulent size maker here. Cut it in half. And look how nice that little piece is. So now I can use that little piece to cover up any of the grapevine that's showing. I think I'm going to put it right here. Give it a little bit of glue. I'm going to tuck it in right there. So I'm kind of leaning it so it's leaning out. These are sort of facing up. Now I'm going to put pieces in that are leaning out in different directions. So I've got more of this wonderful stemmy succulent here, and I'm going to cut off another section to use. It just makes such a nice little piece when you figure out that you can cut them apart. And I'm going to give that a little bit of glue, and I'm going to tuck that in here like that. So now I've tucked in some little succulent pieces that I snipped off of other succulents in the edges here. And I still have a couple spots that I wish I had more succulents to put in, but I do because I have the excess from when I cut the top off of one of these. This is the bottom that was left behind. Well, I can use that too. So I'm going to cut off 3 leaves here. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to cluster these together like it's its own little succulent. And 3 is a very normal number in nature. Things grow in 3s. And I can glue these 3 together and tuck them in where I need them, here or over here. Oh, I do think they need to be over here. And so that's a way that you can get more out of your succulents. I'm just going to glue these. Put a little glue on the back of that one, tuck it in here. And then that's going to fill up that space. Put that on the back here and tuck that in here. And then it just looks like it's one other little plant thing growing back in here, tucked under the shell like that. That's just kind of a fun little trick that you can take these extra pieces. I snip the center out of this and put it here, but I can also take some of the leaves out of this one. These are just my wire cutters. Cutting some of these leaves out. Couple 3. And I can take these 3 and glue them somewhere else. Where do I need them? Well, I think up over here. Make sure you look all around your wreath so you don't miss any big spots. It doesn't matter if you miss little spots because that's what the moss is for. The moss is going to fill in any little extra spaces that we have, and it kind of brings the whole thing together. It kind of tightens it all up. It's sort of like mortar in between tiles in a mosaic. So this is our moss. This is Spanish moss. It's a beautiful green color. So I'm just going to pull off a little piece like this. I'm going to wad up the Spanish moss into a little clump like that, and I'm going to put a little hot glue on it. But I want you to be careful that you don't just take that and then press it in, and now the hot glue is going to come up through the moss and burn your fingers. That's no fun. So that's what our craft stick is for. I'm going to put some glue on it, and I'm going to tuck this under here, and I'm going to use the craft stick to push it into place. So I'm putting the moss under the edges of the shells and succulents on the inside, and I'm going to put them on the outside too. There's different kinds of moss. You can get a kind of moss that's more like a sponge. It reminds me of the sponge trees in an old train set, how they're made of this kind of spongy material dyed green. And you could use that kind too, but we really love Spanish moss. It's from Florida where we grew up, so we're used to seeing it. It reminds us of home. But we also like how it's very loose and it just fills in things so nicely without you doing much work. A little glue. I forgot to use the craft stick on the last batch of moss, and I was very lucky I wasn't burned. So try to remember that. So I'm just doing little pieces here for these little sections, and then I can do bigger pieces for the outside edge. I'm grabbing a chunk of my moss here, and I'm just going to hit it in a couple spots with the glue, and I'm going to go up here around the back side on the back and top of the wreath and tuck that in. And when you're all done, if you feel like your moss is too hairy, you can always give it a little trim haircut. I like to just get it in place to start. And I'm just going to keep tucking little pieces of moss in and around the wreath, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So now I've tucked in moss all around the wreath, and I want to show you a couple of the places I tucked it. I tucked small pieces up around the inside of the wreath, and I covered all of the grapevine all the way around. And then I made sure I went around the outside edge and tucked it up under the shells and up around the succulents covering the grapevine all the way around the wreath. Then I also looked at the wreath and I noticed if there were any places where some of the grapevine was showing, maybe between the shells. And I have a little bit here and a little here and a little over here. And I tucked in a little extra moss right in there just to kind of cover that up. And the whole thing looks more anchored together now by the moss, but also looks a little bit messy and a little hairy. And that's because it needs a little cleanup. So this is what I like to do last, is go through and just pick out any of those little pieces of moss that got stuck in our seashells or in our succulents here. Brush that off. And then I like to take a little pair of scissors and kind of trim it up. If you like this loose look, you can keep it just like it is. And it does look pretty fun this way. But I want to show you that you can also trim it a little bit. So like this piece is hanging out here, I can cut that off. I don't recommend pulling it because you'll just pull the moss off of the grapevine wreath and you don't want that. Like this piece is in the way, blocking our shell. I'm going to cut that one off. Cut a little off the top here. And so you can just go around and trim up the edges. And it's also a good time to look for glue strings because we're using hot glue and we always get glue strings with our hot glue. You can look and see if there are any glue strings coming off of your wreath, and you can trim those off too. And so once I have it kind of cleaned up and shaped a little bit, just go around the edge and give it a little trim to make it more round. That little piece there. I can kind of tuck in the rest, push it in a little bit, make it look a little bit more tidy. There's one more glue string here. And then we are all done. And because this is a grapevine wreath, I don't put a hanger on it. It has enough business going on in the background and behind the wreath with the grapevine that it usually hangs on a hook or a nail just fine. But if you want to, you could make a hanger with a little bit of floral wire. And that is our beautiful succulent seashell wreath.